The red and blue lights lit up my rear view like a sudden storm. At first, I honestly thought it was a joke. My brother liked jokes that weren't funny to anyone else. Then I saw the patrol unit number on the bumper. And I saw him. Officer Nolan Kessler, my brother, walking up behind my car with that slow, deliberate stride he used when he wanted to feel powerful. His hand rested near his belt like he'd already decided what kind of person I was. I pulled over on the shoulder, hazards blinking, hands on the wheel. My heart was pounding, but my face stayed still. I'd learned a long time ago that reacting to Nolan only fed him. He tapped my window twice. Hard. I rolled it down halfway. "Evening," he said, voice flat. Not "hey, sis," not "you okay?" Just cop. "Nolan," I said quietly. "What is this?" "License and registration," he replied, the eyes scanning my car like it was a crime scene. "Your right taillight is out." "It wasn't out when I left my apartment," I said. He leaned closer, smile barely there. "Then you'll have no problem cooperating." Behind him, another officer approached on the passenger side, young, nervous, staying in position. Nolan didn't bring a friend, he brought a witness. I reached for my wallet slowly, the way you do when you don't want anyone claiming you made a sudden move. I handed him my license. He looked at it too long, like he was trying to remember the version of me he'd always hated. The sister who didn't need him, didn't worship him, didn't hand him control. He glanced toward the dash and the windshield. And that's when I remembered the tiny detail that would later save my life. 2 days earlier, my husband had insisted we install a dash cam. Not because we lived in a dangerous neighborhood. Not because I was paranoid. Because people lie, he'd said, tightening the mount behind the mirror. And cameras don't care who your brother is. Nolan didn't know it had an interior-facing lens too. He didn't know it uploaded clips to the cloud when it detected impact or sudden movement. He didn't know it recorded audio clearly enough to catch a whisper. "Step out of the vehicle," he said. I blinked once. "Why?" "Step out," he repeated, louder now for the other officer to hear. "Now." I opened the door and stepped onto the gravel shoulder, the cold air hitting my skin. Cars rushed past, loud and indifferent. Nolan moved in close, too close like he wanted me to feel surrounded even in open space. "Turn around," he ordered. I kept my voice calm. "Is your body camera on?" His eyes flashed for half a second, annoyance. Then he smirked. "Worried about accountability?" he asked. "I'm worried about you," I said, and it came out colder than I meant. "Because you're not acting normal." His jaw tightened. "Hands behind your back." I didn't fight. Fighting is how they write a different story. I put my hands behind me. The cuffs snapped shut around my wrists with a clean metallic click that made my stomach drop anyway. The younger officer's eyes widened. "Nolan," he said under his breath, like he wasn't sure this was real. Nolan didn't look at him. "She's being detained," he said, loud enough for the world. "Possible narcotics involvement." My throat tightened. "What did you just say?" He stepped back and looked at my car like it had insulted him. "I smell something," he said. "Ah, you smell your own lie," I replied quietly. His smile disappeared. "Search the vehicle," he told the other officer. The younger officer hesitated. "Do we have—" "Search it," Nolan repeated. And suddenly his voice had that tone people obey without thinking. I stood there handcuffed on the side of the road, watching my brother open my driver's side door like he owned my life. It wasn't even the worst part. The worst part was how comfortable he looked doing it. He leaned into my car, one arm braced on the seat, head ducked under the steering wheel. The interior light came on, warm and soft, and for a split second, I saw the dashcam's tiny indicator glow. Still recording. Nolan rummaged through the console, then the glove compartment, pulling things out slowly like he wanted it to feel thorough. He found nothing because there was nothing. So he made something. He slid his hand under the driver's seat and paused, just long enough to be theatrical. Then he pulled out a small plastic bag. My brain refused it for a second, like it couldn't accept what my eyes were seeing. The bag wasn't mine. I'd never seen it in my life. Nolan held it up between two fingers like he was showing off a trophy. "Well, well," he said. "What do we have here?" The younger officer stepped closer, eyes narrowing. "Where was that?" "Under the seat," Nolan said immediately. "Too fast. Too clean." I swallowed hard, but I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I forced my voice to stay steady. "That isn't mine," I said. "And you know it." Nolan's eyes met mine, cold and bright. "Tell it to the judge," he replied. The cars passing by blurred into noise. My wrists hurt. My mouth went dry. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. His face didn't change. "You want to act like you're better than the family?" he said quietly, "just for me. You want to embarrass Mom at dinner. You want to call me a bully in front of everyone." So that was it. Not justice, not a real suspicion. A petty family argument. A bruised ego with a badge. The younger officer cleared his throat. "Nolan," he said, voice strained. "We need to log this properly." "We will," Nolan snapped. Then he looked at me and raised his voice again, back into performance mode. "Ma'am, you are under arrest for possession." I felt something sharp twist in my chest. Not fear, not exactly. It was betrayal, clean and final. Nolan turned toward his partner and said, "Bag it, tag it. Call it found under the seat." And while he said it, he leaned into my car again, right under the dashcam, muttering something I don't think he realized the microphone could catch. "Make sure her little camera doesn't make it to evidence," he whispered. My stomach dropped in a different way, because he knew. Not that it was there, he didn't know that. But he knew I was the kind of person who would have proof. He just didn't know I already had it. The younger officer looked uncomfortable, like he'd just been pulled into something he didn't sign up for. Nolan didn't care. He led me toward the patrol car like I was already guilty, already ruined, already his. As he shoved me into the back seat, I turned my head and saw my dashcam still blinking through the windshield, quiet, steady, recording everything my brother thought he could get away with. And I realized this wasn't going to be a normal arrest. This was going to be a cover-up. The back seat of a patrol car feels smaller than it looks from the outside. The door shut with a heavy, final sound, and the cage between me and the front seats turned the whole car into a moving box. Nolan didn't sit up front like my brother. He sat up front like a man auditioning for authority. The younger officer drove, glancing at Nolan as if he was waiting to be told what kind of night this was going to be. Nolan spoke first. Not to me. "Call it a clean stop," he said, casual. "Plain view once we found the bag." Plain view. I stared at the back of his head and kept my breathing slow. If I gave him panic, he'd call it guilt. If I gave him anger, he'd call it instability. So I gave him nothing, just my voice, steady. "I want my lawyer," I said. Nolan didn't turn around. "You'll get a phone call," he replied, "after booking." "I also want my property receipt," I said, "with every item listed." That made him glance back just once, irritation flickering in his eyes like a warning light. "Always the control freak," he muttered. I didn't correct him because control was the only thing that kept people like Nolan from writing your entire life into a report. At the station, the fluorescent lights hit my eyes like a slap. Nolan marched me through the entrance as if he wanted every camera to catch his hero walk. The younger officer, still quiet, still uncomfortable, held the baggie in an evidence pouch like it was radioactive. The desk sergeant looked up, bored, then saw Nolan and straightened slightly. "Kessler," he said, "what have you got?" Nolan's voice was smooth. "Traffic stop," he said. "Found contraband under the driver's seat. Possession." The sergeant glanced at me. "Name?" I said it myself, clear and calm. "Lena Kessler." The sergeant's eyebrows lifted at the shared last name. His eyes flicked to Nolan for half a second, then away, like he didn't want to see what he was seeing. Nolan leaned in slightly toward the sergeant and spoke lower. "She's been a problem," he said. A problem, not a suspect, not an offender. A problem. I watched the sergeant's face shift into something tighter, more careful. He knew the word was wrong. He also knew Nolan was one of theirs. That's when I stopped pretending this was going to be handled fairly by default. I started building a record. "Sergeant," I said, voice even, "I'm requesting a supervisor. And I want it noted that the arresting officer is my brother." Nolan's head snapped toward me. "Don't note it," I repeated calmly, looking at the sergeant, not at Nolan. "Also note that I requested counsel immediately, and I'm requesting preservation of all body camera and dash camera footage from the stop." The sergeant's mouth tightened. He looked at Nolan, then at the younger officer, then back at me. "Who was driving?" he asked. The younger officer cleared his throat. "I was," he said, and his voice sounded like a man trying not to step on a landmine. The sergeant nodded slowly. "We'll get you processed," he said, neutral. "Kessler." He nodded at Nolan. "Paperwork. And make sure your cameras are uploaded." Nolan's eyes flashed. For a heartbeat, his mask slipped. Then he smiled like nothing happened. "Of course," he said. "Always. They took my fingerprints. They took my photo. They asked the same questions everyone gets asked, and Nolan hovered nearby like he wanted to watch me get reduced to a file. When they moved me toward the property counter, I saw my purse on a stainless steel table, my phone inside it like a heart I couldn't reach. A civilian clerk slid an inventory sheet toward me. "Confirm your property," she said, bored. I scanned the list fast. Wallet, keys, ring, hair tie, earrings. Then I saw it. Vehicle contents. None listed. None. My stomach tightened. It was too clean, too convenient. "My dash cam," I said calmly. "It's mounted behind the rearview mirror. That's property." The clerk blinked. "Dash cam is in the vehicle," she said. "Vehicle gets impounded." "Noted," I replied. I want it documented that there is a dash cam installed in my vehicle, and I want the vehicle inventory completed by someone who is not related to me." Nolan stepped in, voice sharp. "It's a vehicle accessory," he snapped. "It stays with the car." "It records audio," I said. "It records the stop, and I am requesting that it be preserved." The younger officer's eyes flicked up at that. He looked at Nolan, then away again, like he was watching a train drift toward a wall. The desk sergeant appeared behind the counter again, listening now. "Dash cam?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "New. Cloud connected." Nolan's jaw tightened. "It's irrelevant," he said quickly. "We have the evidence." The sergeant stared at Nolan for a long beat, then looked at me. "What kind of dash cam?" he asked. I answered honestly. "Dual lens," I said. "You'd have front and interior." That word, interior, hit Nolan like a dart. His eyes went cold again, and for the first time that night, I saw something under his confidence. Urgency. He turned too fast and said, "I need to go finish the tow paperwork." He was already moving before anyone responded. That's when I knew exactly what he was about to do. He was going back to my car, to remove the one thing he couldn't talk his way out of. I didn't shout. I didn't lunge. I did the one thing Nolan couldn't control. I asked for a phone call. "Sergeant," I said, voice steady, "I need my call now." The sergeant glanced at the clock, then at my cuffs, then nodded. "One call," he said. They led me to a wall phone bolted to the concrete like it was designed for people who didn't deserve privacy. My wrists ached as I lifted the receiver. I called my husband, and he picked up on the first ring, voice tight with fear. "Lena?" "I'm okay," I said immediately. "Listen, Nolan pulled me over and found drugs under my seat. It's a setup. Silence on the other end, then a sharp inhale. What? Don't argue with anyone, I said, calm but urgent. Open the Dashcam app, right now. Check for an event clip. He leaned into the car and said something about the camera. My husband didn't ask why. He didn't waste time. I'm opening it, he said, fingers moving fast. I could hear the sound of a keyboard. It's loading. My pulse hit once. Then he said, I see it. My throat tightened. You see what? There's a clip, he whispered. Time-stamped. It triggered when the car shook when the door opened hard. Download it, I said. Save it twice. Cloud and local. I'd send it to my attorney. We don't have your attorney, he said, panic rising. Then send it to yourself and to a new email you create, I said, keeping my voice steady. And text my friend Sienna, she has my lawyer's number. I heard rapid clicking. Then my husband's voice dropped into something raw. Oh my God, he whispered. What? I asked. It shows him, he said, and his voice cracked. It shows Nolan's hand already holding the bag before he reaches under the seat. My eyes closed for 1 second. Not relief. Not yet. Because Nolan could still try to bury it. Is there audio? I asked. Yes, my husband said, and I heard his breathing change like he was listening to it again. You can hear him. You can hear him say, he says, make sure her little camera doesn't make it to evidence. My stomach went cold in a clean line. Okay, I said quietly. You have it. That's the spine of this. What do I do? My husband asked, voice shaking now. What do I do right now? You go to the station, I said. And you don't talk to Nolan. You ask for the watch commander. You tell them there's exculpatory dashcam footage and Nolan is attempting to interfere with evidence. I'm going, he said, breathless. I'm going right now. And one more thing, I said, lowering my voice. If the dashcam goes offline suddenly, that's also evidence. He went silent. Then, the app just changed, he said. My chest tightened. Changed how? It says the camera is disconnected, he whispered. It was online 2 seconds ago. I stared at the cinder block wall in front of me and felt my pulse slow instead of spike. Because that wasn't a glitch. That was Nolan. And he had just made the worst mistake of his career because if he'd left it alone, he could have argued about angles and shadows and interpretation. But disconnecting it right after my husband accessed the clip wasn't interpretation. It was intent. I hung up the phone and turned calmly to the officer waiting by the door. I need to speak to the watch commander, I said. Now. The officer hesitated. Why? Because my dashcam just went offline, I replied evenly. And the arresting officer is my brother. The officer's eyes flicked down the hallway like he suddenly didn't want to be holding this problem. Then he nodded once. Wait here, he said, and walked away. I stood alone with the dial tone still faint in my ear, wrists cuffed, heart steady, watching the hall like a person watching a door that was about to open. High because once the chain of custody gets involved, Nolan couldn't charm his way out. He'd have to explain why my camera went offline at the exact moment the clip was accessed, and why his voice was on it. The watch commander didn't come running. He came walking, slow, controlled, like he'd already decided this was going to be handled with procedure, not volume. A tall man in a white uniform shirt stopped outside the phone area and looked at the officer who'd fetched him. His nameplate read, Lieutenant Mason Greer. His eyes moved to my cuffs, then to my face, then passed me down the hallway like he was looking for the person who caused this. You asked to see me, he said. Yes, I replied calmly. The arresting officer is my brother. He planted contraband in my car. I have dashcam footage. It was accessed from the cloud, and the camera went offline immediately after. I'm requesting preservation of all body cam, dashcam, CAD, and impound footage. Lieutenant Greer didn't react with disbelief. He reacted with a question that told me he understood risk. "Which brother?" he asked. "Nolan Kessler," I said. His jaw tightened slightly, not shock. Recognition. He turned to the officer at the door. "Go get Sergeant Patel," he said, "and tell Kessler to report to interview room 2. Now." The officer hesitated. "Lieutenant..." "Now," Greer repeated, voice flat. Then he looked at me again. "Do you have counsel?" he asked. "I requested counsel at the desk," I said. "I also requested my call, and I used it to have my husband pull the dashcam clip. He confirmed it shows my brother holding the bag before he finds it." Greer's eyes narrowed. Your husband has the clip," he said. "Yes," I replied. "And the dashcam app logs show the disconnection event right after." "Okay," he said quietly. "We're going to do this clean." He walked me, still cuffed, into an interview room that smelled like stale coffee and disinfectant. A camera in the corner blinked. The kind of camera that makes people behave because it creates a second record. Greer sat on the opposite side of the table and said, "Start from the beginning. Keep it factual." So I did. I described the stop, the second officer, the search, Nolan reaching under the seat, the bag appearing, Nolan's whisper about the camera, the property inventory that didn't list the dash cam, the moment my husband accessed the clip, the moment the camera went offline. I didn't call Nolan names. I didn't say he was evil. I said what happened. In order, like a timeline you can't charm away. Greer listened without interrupting. When I finished, he stood and opened the door. "Sergeant Patel," he said to someone outside, "get me the CAD call log for the traffic stop, body cam upload status for Kessler and his partner, and the tow sheet with the impound yard location. I want a preservation hold placed immediately." A woman's voice answered, "Yes, sir." Greer came back in and looked at me. "What dashcam model?" he asked. I told him. He nodded once. "Cloud storage?" he murmured. "Metadata." "Exactly." A few minutes later, the door opened again. Nolan walked in. Not as my brother, as a man who expected the room to belong to him. His uniform was perfect. His hair was perfect. His face was controlled, but his eyes were sharp, already scanning for where the threat was coming from. And he looked at me first, and the tiniest smile tried to form, like he wanted to remind me I was still in cuffs. Then he saw Lieutenant Greer. The smile died. "Lieutenant," Nolan said, forcing politeness. "I heard you wanted me." "Sit," Greer said, not offering him anything else. Nolan sat, but his posture screamed resistance. "What is this?" he asked, voice light, like he expected to laugh it off later. Greer didn't laugh. "Your arrestee says you planted narcotics," he said, "and that her dashcam recorded it." Nolan scoffed softly. "That's ridiculous." Greer's eyes didn't move. "Where's her vehicle right now?" he asked. "Impound," Nolan said immediately. "Which yard?" Greer asked. Nolan hesitated, just a fraction. "Riverview," he said. Greer nodded once. "Good. We're placing a preservation hold," he said. No one touches it until a supervisor signs off, including you." Nolan's jaw tightened. "Lieutenant, with respect, she's trying to create confusion. She's angry because I'm doing my job." Greer leaned forward slightly. "Then you should welcome the footage," he said. Nolan's eyes flicked to me again. Cold, warning. Then Greer said, "Is your body camera on?" "It was on during the stop," Nolan replied. Greer didn't let the sentence stand alone. "Is it uploaded?" Nolan's throat moved. "It will be." "Is it uploaded?" Greer repeated, sharper. Nolan's mask stayed in place, but the edges were cracking. "Not yet," he said. Greer nodded like he'd expected that. "Then we're putting it into evidence intake ourselves," he said. "Sergeant Patel is retrieving it." Nolan sat back too fast. "That's not necessary." "It is," Greer cut in. "Because this is now a credibility issue. Nolan's eyes flashed. Credibility? He echoed. Greer stayed calm. Yes, he said. Because you arrested your sister. That alone requires scrutiny. Nolan opened his mouth to speak. The door opened again. My husband stepped in, breathless, eyes wide with fear and fury he was trying to keep under control. His name is Evan, and I could see how badly he wanted to explode. But he didn't. He walked straight to Lieutenant Greer and said, I have the video. Greer's posture shifted instantly. How? He asked. Evan held up his phone. Dashcam cloud app. He said, I downloaded it. I saved it. I emailed it to myself and I screen recorded the metadata page before it disconnected. Nolan's face went tight. Greer held out his hand. Send it to this address, he said, sliding a card across the table. Right now, and do not delete it. Evan nodded and started tapping. Nolan snapped, You can't use that. Civilian recording? Greer cut him off without even looking at him. We're not debating admissibility in this room, he said. We're determining whether an officer committed misconduct and whether an arrest is legitimate. Evan's phone chimed. Sent, he said. Greer turned to a desktop computer in the room, logged in, and pulled up the file. The clip loaded. For a second, all you could hear was the faint audio of wind and passing cars. Then the video showed the inside of my car, my dashboard, my steering wheel, Nolan's uniform filling the frame as he leaned in. And then it happened. On camera, clear as daylight. Nolan's right hand was already holding the small bag when he leaned into the driver's area. Now he didn't pull it from under the seat. He brought it in with him. I watched Lieutenant Greer's face as he processed it. He didn't gasp. He didn't shout. He went still. Then the audio caught Nolan's voice, low, impatient, saying words that hit the room like a door slamming. Make sure her little camera doesn't make it to evidence. Evan exhaled sharply like he'd been holding his breath since the moment he opened the app. Nolan's face shifted from control to calculation in half a second. That's edited, he said immediately. Lieutenant Greer didn't even look at him. It's a cloud file with timestamps, he said. And your voice is on it. Nolan's jaw clenched. She's been planning this, he snapped, trying to build a narrative fast. She wants to ruin me. Greer finally turned his head slightly, eyes hard. You ruined yourself, he said quietly. Nolan stood up too fast, chair scraping. Lieutenant, this is... Greer raised a hand. Sit, he said. Nolan didn't sit. Greer's voice sharpened. Officer Kessler, he said, you are being ordered to sit down. Nolan's hands twitched at his sides. Then he sat, slow, furious, like obedience tasted bitter. Greer turned to me. Lena, he said, using my first name for the first time. I'm removing you from Nolan's custody right now. Your charges are being reviewed immediately. Nolan snapped. You can't just... Greer cut him off. I can, he said. And I am. He stood, opened the door, and spoke to Sergeant Patel outside. Get Internal Affairs on the phone, he said. Now. And notify the on-call prosecutor that we have exculpatory footage that must be reviewed before any filing. He looked at Nolan again. You, he said, hand over your duty weapon to Sergeant Patel and your body camera right now. Nolan's face went white-hot with rage. This is insane. Greer's voice stayed flat. Administrative leave pending investigation, he said. You do not leave this building until I A instructs it. Nolan's eyes flicked to me one last time. Pure hatred. And I recognized something there that had nothing to do with law enforcement. It was personal. It was the same spite he'd carried since we were kids when my mother praised him and punished me for refusing to play along. Sergeant Patel entered, calm and firm, and Nolan's hands moved slowly to unclip his body cam. As she took it, Nolan leaned slightly toward Greer and said, "Low, poisonous. Even if you clear her, the prosecutor will still file. You'll see." Greer didn't blink. Then the prosecutor will have to explain why he ignored exculpatory evidence, he said. Nolan's smile returned, small, ugly. "Good luck," he whispered. And that's when Sergeant Patel's radio crackled with a sentence that made my stomach tighten again. "Lieutenant," the voice said, "Impound just called. Someone already accessed the vehicle." Greer's eyes narrowed. "Who?" he asked. A pause. Then, "Officer Kessler's credentials were used at the gate." Nolan didn't say a word. He didn't have to, because that meant he'd tried to get to my dash cam anyway, after he knew it existed, after he knew it recorded him, after he'd already been caught. And if he was desperate enough to do that, it meant he wasn't done. When the radio said my brother's credentials had been used at the impound gate, Lieutenant Greer didn't look at me first. He looked straight at Nolan. It wasn't dramatic. It was worse than that, quiet, focused, like he was lining up facts in his head and deciding which ones were going to become charges. "Nolan," Greer said, voice flat, "did you access the impound yard tonight?" Nolan didn't blink. "No," he said immediately. Greer didn't argue. He turned to Sergeant Patel. "Get me the gate log," he said. "Printed, time-stamped, and pull the yard's camera feed for the gate." Patel was already moving. Nolan's jaw worked like he was chewing anger. "Lieutenant, this is getting ridiculous," he snapped. "You're letting her—" "Stop," Greer said, sharper now. "You don't get to narrate this." Evans sat beside me in the interview room, hands clasped so tight his knuckles looked white. His eyes kept flicking to Nolan like he was fighting the urge to jump the table. I touched Evans' wrist once, a small signal. Don't give Nolan a new story to write. Greer looked at me. "Lena," he said, calm again, "you're not under Nolan's custody anymore. But you're not leaving yet. I need you available for statements." "I understand," I said. The door opened and Patel came back with a single sheet of paper and a tablet. She handed the paper to Greer and angled the tablet so he could see. Greer read the paper once, then looked up. "Gate scan," he said aloud. "Officer Kessler's credentials. Time, 11:14. Nolan's face tightened so hard the muscle in his jaw jumped. "That's impossible," he said, too fast. "Someone stole my—" Greer lifted the tablet slightly. "And here's the gate camera," he said, voice steady. He tapped play. The footage was grainy, but it didn't need to be perfect. But a patrol SUV rolled up to the gate. The driver's door opened. A uniformed figure stepped out. Nolan. Same build, same walk, same posture that always said he owned the space he was in. He leaned toward the keypad, scanned his credential, the gate slid open, and he drove in. Nolan stared at the screen like it was insulting him. Then he laughed, one short, ugly sound. "Okay," he said. "Fine." I went there. Greer didn't move. "You just told me you didn't." Nolan's eyes flashed. "I went to secure evidence," he said, "because I knew you'd try to screw it up." Greer's voice dropped. "You were ordered not to touch that vehicle," he said. "You went anyway. That is direct interference." Nolan leaned forward. "It's my case." "It was," Greer corrected, cold. Patel stepped closer without raising her voice. "Hand me your keys," she said to Nolan. "Your department keys now." Nolan stared at her. "No." Patel didn't argue. She just looked at Greer. Greer's eyes hardened. "Officer Kessler," he said, "you are now being detained pending internal affairs review. If you refuse orders, you will be physically restrained. Do you understand?" For a second, Nolan looked like he might explode. Then he shoved his keys onto the table hard enough to make them bounce. Greer turned to Patel. Take him to holding, he said. Separate from the public area. Nolan stood, chair scraping, and as Patel guided him toward the door, he twisted his head toward me, eyes full of something that wasn't law enforcement at all. It was pure spite. This isn't over, he mouthed. I didn't respond, because the record was responding for me. As soon as Nolan was out, Greer turned to Evan. I need that Dashcam clip preserved in 3 places, he said. Email, cloud, and a physical copy. I already sent it, Evan said, voice tight. And I can save it to a drive. Do it, Greer said. Then he looked at me. And I want you to tell me exactly what the family argument was, he added quietly. The real motive? I took a slow breath and kept it factual. It was money, I said. Not drugs, not crime. Money and pride. Greer's expression didn't change. It didn't need to. He'd seen that motive in every uniform he'd ever disciplined. Before I could say more, Patel came back, breath controlled. He's in holding, she said. Internal Affairs is on the way, and the on-call prosecutor is asking for an immediate briefing. Greer nodded once. Good, he said. Then he turned to me. One more thing, he added. Did you notice your taillight was out? No, I said. It wasn't. Greer's eyes narrowed. We're going to check that, he said. He stood and looked at Patel. You and I are going to the impound yard, he said. We're documenting everything Nolan did there. Lena stays here. My stomach tightened. My car? I know, Greer said, calm. We'll treat it like a crime scene now. An hour later, Greer came back into the station with a different kind of stillness in his face. Not suspicion, not curiosity. Certainty. He held a manila folder in his hand, and Patel carried a small, clear evidence bag with something dark inside. Greer sat across from me and slid the folder onto the table. Impound footage, he said. Multiple angles. Evan leaned forward. What did he do? Greer opened the folder and pulled out 2 printed still frames, grainy but unmistakable. The first showed Nolan at my driver's side door, shoulders hunched into the car. The second showed his arm lifted toward the windshield area, right where my dashcam was mounted. He went straight for your camera, Greer said quietly. My throat tightened, but my voice stayed level. That's why it went offline, I said. Greer nodded once. He unplugged it, he said. Then he attempted to remove the mount. Patel set the clear bag on the table. Inside was a cracked piece of plastic and a dangling cable. The mount, she said. Impound staff found it on the driver's floor mat after he left. Evan's face hardened. He destroyed it. Greer's eyes stayed calm. He tried. He corrected. But the cloud clip is already preserved. And that's what makes this worse, not better. He knew he'd been recorded, and he still interfered. I looked at the broken mount and felt something settle in my chest. Heavy. Steady. Because Nolan hadn't just framed me. He'd tried to bury the proof after he realized he'd been caught. Greer leaned forward slightly. Now I'm going to tell you what's happening, he said. Internal Affairs is opening a formal investigation tonight. The prosecutor is reviewing the dashcam file and the impound footage before any charges are filed against you. Evan exhaled like he'd been underwater. And there's more, Greer added. He pulled out another sheet from the folder and tapped a line with his finger. Vehicle inspection, he said. Your taillight isn't out. Both are working. I didn't smile, I just nodded. So the stop was pretext, I said. Yes, Greer replied. And the body cam. My stomach tightened again. Greer's jaw flexed. Nolan's body cam has a gap, he said. It shows the stop beginning. Then it goes dark right before he searches under the seat. Then it resumes right after the find. Evan's eyes widened. He turned it off. Greer nodded once. The metadata shows manual deactivation, he said. Not a battery failure, not a glitch. That one detail, metadata, felt like my father's voice from years ago, telling me how the world really works. People can lie, but systems leave footprints. The interview room door opened and a woman in plain clothes stepped in, badge clipped to her belt. Internal Affairs. Her name was Renee Voss. She didn't look at me like I was a suspect. She looked at me like I was a witness. Lena Kessler? She asked. Yes, I said. Hon, I'm going to take your statement, she said. And then I'm going to speak to Officer Nolan Kessler. Her tone wasn't angry. It was procedural, which in that building was more terrifying than anger. Renee sat, turned on a recorder, and asked me to tell it again. Timeline, words, movements. I did calmly. Evan confirmed the dashcam access and the disconnection time. Greer added the gate scan log and the impound footage. Patel added the broken mount recovered from the car. When we finished, Renee stood, collected her folder, and paused at the door. Then she looked back at me and said one sentence that made my pulse hit once, hard. He's claiming you begged him to teach you a lesson, she said evenly. And he says you planted the dashcam to set him up. I didn't blink. I just looked at her and answered with the only thing that mattered. Then ask him why he turned off his body cam, I said. Ask him why he went to impound after being ordered not to. And ask him why the bag appears in his hand before it appears under my seat. Renee's eyes held mine for a beat. Then she nodded once. Small, tight. Okay, she said. Now we see how far he's willing to lie. She opened the door, and from somewhere down the hall I heard Nolan's voice rise. Angry, loud, followed by a sharp command I recognized from every cop show I'd ever avoided watching. Put your hands behind your back. Evan's head snapped toward the sound. So did mine, because I couldn't tell yet who the command was for. But I knew one thing for sure. The next few minutes were going to decide whether Nolan walked out of that building in uniform or in cuffs. The hallway noise wasn't chaotic, and it was controlled chaos, the kind that happens when trained people move quickly but still follow procedure. A door opened somewhere down the corridor. Footsteps. A chair scraping. Nolan's voice, sharp and furious, trying to reclaim control with volume. Then another voice. Calm, higher, unmistakably female. Officer Kessler, stand up. Internal Affairs. Renee Voss. I sat in the interview room with my hands still cuffed in front of me now, watching Evan's face tighten as he listened. His eyes kept flicking to the door like he wanted to run out and see. Lieutenant Greer stood near the wall, arms folded, posture steady. He didn't look surprised. He looked like a man watching a process he'd already started. The hallway voice rose again. Nolan, louder. This is harassment, he shouted. You're taking her side because she cried to you. Renee's voice stayed level. No one is taking sides. We are documenting facts. A beat. Then, turn around. Another beat. Then the sound that made the air in my lungs go cold. Metal on metal. Handcuffs. Evan whispered. Oh my God! Lieutenant Greer didn't move. He simply exhaled once. Slow. The interview room door opened and Sergeant Patel stepped in first. Behind her was Renee Voss, and behind Renee, Nolan, my brother, handcuffed. His face was red with fury, eyes burning, jaw clenched so hard it looked painful. He tried to keep his posture upright, but the cuffs changed everything. They made him look human, not powerful, not protected. Renee guided him into the room, like she was bringing in a piece of evidence. Nolan's eyes locked onto mine immediately, and for a split second, the whole building disappeared and we were kids again, him furious that I wouldn't play the game the way he wanted. Then he leaned forward, voice low, poisonous. You're a dead to me, he hissed. I didn't flinch. Renee pulled a chair out and made him sit. Officer Kessler, she said, you are being detained for interview. Any attempt to intimidate a witness will be documented. Nolan laughed once, ugly. Witness? He snapped. She's my sister. She's the one who's been trying to ruin me since we were teenagers. Renee didn't argue with his childhood story. She opened her folder and slid a single sheet across the table. This is the body cam metadata, she said. Manual deactivation during the critical search window. Explain. Nolan's eyes flicked to it, then away. Battery, he said quickly. Glitch. Renee didn't raise her voice. The metadata indicates manual deactivation. That means a button press, she replied. Explain. Nolan's nostrils flared. Fine, he snapped. I turned it off because she was hysterical and I didn't want her screaming on camera. Evan's hands clenched. She wasn't hysterical, he said, voice tight. Renee held up a hand to Evan. Let him speak, she said. Nolan's eyes flashed toward Evan. Who are you? He sneered. Her husband? The guy who thinks he's saving her? Evan didn't answer. Renee slid the next exhibit forward. The dashcam clip? She said simply. Nolan's face shifted in a way that was almost involuntary, anger mixing with calculation. That's edited, he said immediately. Renee didn't bite. She turned the laptop screen toward him and clicked into a file properties view. Date, time, upload event, hash value. You understand what a hash is? She asked. Nolan hesitated for half a second. Sure, he muttered. Good, Renee said. Because the file your department received matches the hash value of the file pulled from the cloud. That means it wasn't altered. Nolan's mouth tightened. Renee hit play. The same moment played again. Nolan leaning into my car, bag already in his hand. His own voice, clear as a knife. Make sure her little camera doesn't make it to evidence. Nolan stared at the screen like it was betraying him personally. Renee paused the clip and slid a third exhibit across. Impound gate log, she said. Your credentials, time-stamped. Then impound footage showing you going straight to the dashcam mount. Nolan's hands twitched inside the cuffs. That was to secure evidence, he snapped. Renee's voice stayed calm. You were ordered not to touch the vehicle, she said. You went anyway. You unplugged and attempted to remove the dashcam. That is interference. Nolan leaned back, breathing hard, eyes burning. You're making it sound worse than it is. Renee tilted her head slightly. Then tell me why you did it, she said. Silence. Not because Nolan didn't have an answer. Because the real answer was petty and ugly, and saying it out loud would destroy what he thought he was. I watched him the way you watch someone who has always been protected suddenly realize the shield is gone. Finally, Nolan looked at me and said, You humiliated Mom. That was it. That was his motive. Not public safety, family pride. Renee looked at me, then back to Nolan. That is not a lawful reason to arrest someone, she said, voice flat. Nolan snapped, You don't understand our family. Renee didn't blink. I understand evidence, she replied. Then she turned to Lieutenant Greer. Release her, she said. Greer nodded once and spoke to Patel. Remove her cuffs. Patel stepped behind me and the cuffs came off with a click that felt like blood returning to my fingers. My wrists were red, but my hands were steady. Evan reached for my hand. I squeezed once. Not because I was okay, because I was still controlled. Renee stood and said, Here's what happens next. She looked at Nolan. Your arrest report is being flagged for falsification. The narcotics evidence is being sent for independent review, and chain of custody is being audited. You are placed on immediate administrative suspension pending criminal review. Nolan's eyes widened. Criminal? Renee didn't soften it. Yes, she said, because planting evidence, falsifying reports, and interfering with evidence are crimes. Nolan's face went pale in a way I'd never seen. Then he turned his head sharply toward Greer. "You're going to let her walk?" he snapped. "After she did this?" Greer's eyes stayed hard. "You did this," he said quietly. Nolan's breathing turned fast, frantic. "Mom will fix this," he blurted. "Mom knows people, Renee's tone sharpened for the first time. "Do not contact anyone about this case," she said. "Any attempt to influence witnesses or evidence will be added." Nolan's eyes burned with hate as he looked at me. "You think you won?" he hissed. I finally spoke to him directly, still calm. "I didn't win," I said. "I survived what you tried to do." Renee guided Nolan out. Patel followed. The door shut, and for the first time all night, the room felt breathable. Lieutenant Greer turned to me. "Lena," he said, "the prosecutor is declining charges against you pending review of all evidence. You are free to go." Evan's shoulders sagged like he'd been holding the sky up. We walked out of the station together, the night air cold and clean. My knees felt like rubber for a second, once my body realized it could stop bracing. In the parking lot, Evan asked softly, "What now?" I looked back at the station doors and felt something settle in my chest, heavy and final. "Now," I said, "everything he wrote gets audited." Within days, the district attorney opened a criminal investigation into Nolan's arrest report, body cam deactivation, and the impound interference. Internal Affairs completed an emergency suspension. I and Nolan's police powers were revoked pending outcome. The Dashcam cloud metadata and file hash matched across copies, and the impound gate logs and camera footage confirmed he accessed my vehicle after explicit orders not to. Nolan was charged with evidence tampering and misconduct-related offenses tied to the planted contraband and falsified report, and he was terminated from the department after a disciplinary hearing. A protective order was issued barring him from contacting me and Evan, and the department issued a formal letter clearing my name after the case was reviewed. The petty family argument he tried to win ended the only thing he cared about, his badge, and the proof came from the one tiny detail he dismissed as irrelevant. In the comments, tell me this. If a family member with power tried to destroy you, how would you confront them right away? Or would you do what I did and let a camera and a clean timeline speak for you? If you want more stories like this, hit like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.